There are 104 days of summer vacation before school comes around just to end it, and there's no one better than Phineas and Ferb when it comes to finding a good way to spend it. From building a rocket, fighting a mummy, or climbing up the Eiffel Tower, these dudes have done some of the most wild and insane things imaginable to make the most of that time. They basically have it down to a science, which is pretty fitting, as today we're going to be covering every single creation and invention that Phineas and Ferb put together over their summer vacations. And there are a lot of them, so buckle up. All of this wackiness begins when Phineas is worried about not having any cool stories to tell about their summer when they go back to school, and so he says that summer should feel like a roller coaster, an idea that he takes pretty literally. So when their mom leaves for the day, the boys get to work on building their own epic roller coaster. And this thing is huge, quickly expanding across the entire city. The coolest coaster ever makes a very brief debut before being abducted by a giant magnet and is taken away before Linda can see it, and eventually crashes into the tree in the backyard, exploding into flames. The magnet that pulls the roller coaster away is one of Doofenshmirtz's inventions, which we aren't talking about in this video, but you can leave a like if you want us to cover the inators in another video. With that though, we can move on to the morning of Candace's birthday. Phineas and Ferb wake up determined to get her a better present than last year, which was a gorilla hidden in a birthday cake, and admittedly that is a tough one to beat. However, they end up at Mount Rushmore, where the boys quickly begin carving their sister's head into the mountain alongside the president's. Candace is actually very touched by this, but when she tries to show her mother, lava starts spouting out of Rock Candace's face as a geyser is set off, and the monument is basically restored to the way it was before Phineas and Ferb's hard work. Their next invention, though, was much more similar to the roller coaster. Phineas is captivated by the racetrack behind the house, and so he and Ferb trick out their mom's car, fully equipping it with a remote control and springs that allow it to jump, which conveniently hides the vehicle from their mom's sight. They take the car to compete in the Swamp Oil 500, accompanied by their pit crew, made up of Isabella's fireside girl buddies. The car is eventually stolen by Dr. Doofenshmirtz, and Perry hijacks the remote, spinning it through a car wash and removing any of the details that the boys added before springing it back home into the garage. The next invention is from Lawn Gnome Beach Party of Terror. On a particularly hot day in the summer, everyone is advised to relax and keep cool, but the boys choose to beat the heat by going to the beach, or at least by making their own beach in their backyard, which leads to a ton of people showing up and enjoying the sand and cool waves. Phineas also throws together a holographic projector that he uses during a surfing competition to throw off Buford's attempt to knock him down, but unfortunately, the beach ends up getting sucked up by one of Doofenshmirtz's inators, and the boys move on to their next invention, which is yet another way to beat the heat, this time with the help of an old snow cone machine dug up by their dad and a metric ton of ice. Phineas and Ferb put together a Swinter Wonderland in their backyard. As the snow piles up, more people gather to enjoy some relief from the heat and take part in loads of Swinter festivities, before a citywide power outage shuts off all of the fans that were keeping the snow frozen. In the episode Flop Stars, Phineas and Ferb set out to create a one-hit wonder. They put together a band called Phineas and the Ferbtones and write a chart-topping song that they perform on stage in the next Super American Pop Teen Idol Star competition. Phineas throws a diva tantrum, they hear their song as elevator music, and finally they perform a reunion tour and retire, all in the same day. But this isn't the only time that the boys make it to the big stage. Phineas and Ferb put together a boxing stadium in the mall parking lot for Phineas's thumb wrestling match with Buford. He and Buford eventually call a truce before Doofenshmirtz's latest inator makes the audience clean up and take down the entire arena before Linda can come and see it. Keeping on this theme of gaining attention, Phineas and Ferb write a script parodying the princess sensibilities called The Curse of the Princess Monster. They produce the movie and release it in theaters, but the reviews are squashed when the audience was turned ancient due to a stray Doofenator beam, which ended up crushing their directing careers. Later, when the kids go to camp at their grandparents' place, Phineas and Ferb make a mechanical monster machine, which they use to scare their friends while sharing ghost stories. Doofenshmirtz gets tangled up in this and thinks that the monsters on the machine are chasing him through the forest, and so he runs away, not realizing that it is still attached to him. The boys' next project appears in Tree to Get Ready, when the boys remodel their old treehouse, and soon Candace's too. These treehouses are equipped with a THF button that can be used to transform them into fighting robot treehouses. The siblings use these to fight through the city, wreaking havoc along the way, before tumbling home and losing all of their added renovations, perfectly timed of course to when their mom arrives back at the house, completely oblivious to her children's antics as usual. Now, onto a bit more of an ambitious experiment when Phineas and Ferb decide to restore the time machine stored in the museum. They successfully go back in time, but unfortunately the machine is destroyed by a dinosaur. However, they find dinosaur footprints that are later fossilized in the same museum and write a message to the Fireside Girls to find in the present. Isabella and co. reconstruct the time machine and go to pick Phineas, Ferb, and Candace up from the past, and with their help, the day is saved. Later, when the circus gets cancelled in Cirque du Soleil, Phineas and Ferb decide to put on their own circus in the backyard. They crowdsource circus acts through their friends and put on a whole show before the circus tent gets filled with Doofelium and flies away before their parents get home. Ferb pulls a lever, and the stands get stored in the ground, so I guess they're just kind of there from then on. Their next creation comes when Candace challenges the boys to make a better toy than the mascot for the toy store that she works at. Phineas and Ferb come up with a toy modeled after their own pet platypus, the Perry the Platypus in action figure. The toy does absolutely nothing and is meant to inspire a child's inner creativity when playing with it. They also revamp the toy company producing their toy while they're at it, because of course they do. Next, Phineas and Ferb set out to help Isabella cure her case of the hiccups, and they make a haunted house to scare them out of her. Isabella treads through the creepy house of horrors, but it doesn't go very well. Thankfully, as Doofenshmirtz and Perry pass overhead, the haunted house gets tangled in some dangling lights on the aircraft, and gets torn out of the ground with Phineas still inside. He falls out and speeds towards the ground before being saved by the Fireside Girls, which does successfully scare the hiccups away. The episode A Hard Day's Night brings the family to London where they visit their grandparents, and Phineas and Ferb end up putting on a medieval tournament. At the castle door, a discarded robot dragon self-destructs and gets rid of all the evidence, just as Linda and Lawrence arrive back. When they return to the tri-state area, Phineas and Ferb realize that they have too many plans to get all of them done by the end of the summer, and so they create android replicas called the Finadroids and Ferbbots so that they can have a few extra hands going around. We see these robots working on what appears to be a microscopic zoo, a tunnel to the center of the earth, hovercraft lounge chairs, overpriced coffee shops, and a chamber of invisibility. The robots get lifted off by a giant magnet, which is great news for Phineas, who was beginning to miss making stuff with Ferb. When Linda's birthday comes around, the boys put together an omelet bar, a giant pop-up card, a fashion show of clothes they got for her, a special birthday video, and a satellite video call with Lawrence, who was away at the time. That was a much bigger deal before the internet and smartphones were everywhere, but this was quite a lot of construction projects. However, Linda deserves nothing but the best. On another day, Phineas and Ferb are having trouble deciding whether to make a submarine or a shrink ray. But when Isabella's dog swallows her Fireside Girl sash, they know they've got to make both. Much like that one episode of the Magic School Bus, the boys shrink themselves down in a submarine and set out to get swallowed by Pinky. However, Candace shows up and eats the sandwich first, and when they eventually get burped up by Candace, the submarine grows back to normal size and gets sucked up by a giant vacuum when she brings her mother to see it. In Runaway Runway, Phineas and Ferb put the cold fusion reactor they were working on the back burner while they delve into the world of fashion design. The boys put together what they call the Summer All the Time collection, and they put on a very successful fashion show, and suddenly everyone is wearing their designs. Candace goes to get their mom to tell them that the boys is ruining her chance at modeling, just as Doofenshmirtz releases a horde of clones onto the mall. The sheer amount of copies of him makes everyone think that pharmacist chic is suddenly in, and they all rush to hop on the trend, leaving no more Summer All the Time to be seen. Their next project comes about when Isabella gets her tonsils removed. They set aside their plans for a Trojan horse reenactment to make a giant ice cream sundae machine. However, when Ferb goes to pick up the blueprints, they get swapped with Doofenshmirtz's blueprints, and the boys accidentally end up making the space lasinator and just end up making the sundae by hand after it flies into space as Linda arrives home. In the episode It's a Mud World, the boys are racing remote control monster trucks that they engineered to go at light speed. This of course leads them to building a real monster truck for Candace to help her practice for her driver's test. Naturally, this comes with a full monster truck arena for them to play around with as she perfects her parallel parking skills. The boys pass the stadium along to some famous monster truckers that showed up to compete with Candace, and they take it away to their next meet just as the kid's mom pulls into the driveway. While camping at their grandparents', the kids go on a treasure hunt. They soup up their grandfather's sailboat into a proper pirate ship and follow Bad Beard's treasure map. This leads them to a treasure chest deep within an island that was recently purchased by Doofenshmirtz, but they are forced to make a run for it when the island begins to self-destruct. That brings us to a very iconic episode of Season 1, We're Getting the Band Back Together, in which Phineas, Ferb, and Candace help Lawrence salvage his forgotten wedding anniversary by getting Linda's favorite band, Love Handle, to play a concert in their backyard. Of course, no concert is complete without a stage and cheering fans, and granted, the stage came from the Fireside Girls. However, everybody worked together to make the night a success. On to the Flying Fishmonger, where the boys recreate their grandfather's long-abandoned fantasy of jumping McGregor's Gorge in the holy mackerel bike of his youth. Phineas gets digging in the backyard while Ferb repairs the bike, and the boys help him finally make the jump of his dreams. Meanwhile, Perry thwarts Doofenshmirtz's latest scheme, which results in all the dirt dug up from the backyard being put back where it came from in almost a Rube Goldberg fashion. And with the help of a quick spot of rain, the grass grows back perfectly, just as Mr. and Mrs. Fletcher get home from the day. Another iconic episode is Phineas and Ferb Get Busted, actually beginning with Linda coming home and really seeing what the boys are doing for once. This time that means turning her car into the flying car of the future today, which of course is complete with a terminal in the sky, self-parking, and invisible helmet heads. Unfortunately, the sky tower falls and crashes into the house due to a missing bolt, and Linda is furious, sending the boys away to reformatory school. When they get there, they immediately start inventing again, modifying their bunk beds into Ferris beds, and getting them into more trouble. Phineas and Ferb are miserable at this school, and their family and Jeremy end up going to break the kids out. Now, the whole episode was a dream anyways, but there are some cool inventions, so I'll be keeping it in here. On the note of modifying vehicles, though, we have the Gladiator Chariot race in the backyard, powered by rocking horses and lawnmower motors. Everyone ends up crashing their chariots at the end of the race, and the debris goes forgotten as Candace becomes convinced that she is turning people to stone. The episode Leave the Busting to Us begins with a massive Ferris wheel rolling away as Linda brings her groceries in from the car. Candace is so frustrated that she is calling in the busting squad, and they catch Phineas and Ferb building a crazy water park in the backyard, but a tornado sweeps through, takes the entire thing away, and Doofenshmirtz steals the van that had the only video footage they got. Oh, and remember when the boys helped their daredevil grandfather achieve his dreams? Well, he is not the only grandparent with unresolved dreams. In the episode Crack That Whip, Phineas and Ferb build a roller rink to help their grandmother squash a lifelong beef against Jeremy's grandmother. However, Doofenshmirtz unknowingly turns the rink into a giant loaf of bread that gets eaten by birds before Linda and Lawrence can see it. Which brings us to our next invention in the episode, Voyage to the Bottom of Buford, where the boys help Buford find his lost goldfish by exploring the ocean with a submarine and scuba suit. They find the goldfish, but he and everyone else gets stolen by a giant squid, so Buford has to save them all. And it just kind of seems like they leave the submarine at the beach. Finally, a case where Candace could bust them, but she doesn't, so I guess we're just not going to worry about it. The next goal for the summer was to build the greatest mini golf course in Danville in their backyard since the local one shut down. 18 holes of major coolness, slides, and windmills, and all of it gets blown away by a super-powered leaf blower. Next up is Phineas and Ferb's body-swapping teleporters. Candace and Perry accidentally swap bodies, and Perry in Candace's body sneaks away to do some super spy work before they can get changed back, which is very unfortunate for Candace in Perry's body, who is waiting for Jeremy to come over. The teleporters end up getting shrunk down by one of Doofenshmirtz's old inators, and Linda takes them to replace her lost hoop earrings. And probably nothing bad ever came from that. Either way, the next episode begins with Candace telling her parents about a moon elevator that the boys are making early in the day. She is determined to get the street lamp footage to get some evidence of the boys' summer project, but Perry steals it from her to protect his identity. The boys then help Candace out by strapping a rocket engine to a bike to catch up to Perry, who is in Doofenshmirtz's Norm robot as a disguise, but Candace sacrifices the disc to save Phineas's life and the rocket engine explodes, destroying any other evidence of their inventions. The boys then go on to make the world's biggest game of bowling. They construct a comically large bowling ball that can be controlled from the inside, kind of like a hamster ball, as well as proportionally large bowling pins to play the biggest game of bowling that the world has ever seen, all in their own backyard. Candace runs off inside the ball to show their parents, but ends up rolling down the subway line and accidentally turning the city into the world's largest game of pinball in the process, earning the boys 2 world records at once. The bowling ball explodes when it strikes through Doofenshmirtz's bowling pin-shaped penguin robots, and that is the end of the gang's bowling adventure. In the episode Oil on Candace, the boys find themselves inspired by a local artist and team up with his son to make a gigantic piece of art for the boys' dad. They paint a portrait of the father and son duo next to one of his existing exhibits, but unfortunately Doofenshmirtz destroys a dam and the water sweeps through and washes the painting away. The episode Unfair Science Fair brings the boys to Baljeet's place to help him build a portal to Mars for his science fair project. After Baljeet gets an A++, it gets unplugged by Doofenshmirtz, who needed the outlet for his own science fair project, and Baljeet's teacher, who is desperate to get it working again, ends up cranking the power on and plugging it into a high voltage outlet, which sucks the machine into itself and makes it disappear. And honestly, I feel kind of bad for him. It seems like he really could have used that win. But keeping on the space-themed episodes, Out to Launch follows the boys as they make not one, but 2 rocket ships to fly to space and see the stars that their dad bought for them and Candace. They lose one of the rockets trying to save Candace, and the other one runs out of fuel and they have to make a pit stop to fill up. When they finally make it home, the second rocket takes back off into space before Linda can see it. Now, if there's one thing that Phineas and Ferb like to do, it is building a whole dang stadium in their backyard. So naturally, in the episode Got Game, when Isabella challenges Buford to a guys vs. girl match of what ends up being called the F Games, there's a full arena complete with a cheering crowd as always. The girls come out victorious and the stadium is taken away by a stray rocket. The next episode brings us back to that space theme once again as the boys put together an observatory in the backyard to watch a comet, carve their face into it, and put on a sweet light show as they do it. The observatory ends up getting hit by a laser and exploding, which ultimately cuts the boys' light show short. Finally, in the last episode of season 1, we see 2 more inventions. First, Phineas and Ferb get working on an animal-run animation studio equipped with a PF5000 animatron. Basically, you tell the device whatever you want, and it puts it through a line of animals that write and storyboard the animation, and then that is fed through an art bot for notes before spitting out an animatic. The gang makes a cartoon about themselves and play it at a showing in the backyard before the screen is hit by one of Doof's inators that makes it dance off into the night before Phineas and Ferb's mom can see any evidence. And our last creation of season 1 is the Rainbow Inator. The boys make this for Isabella to let her see her first rainbow, which is a lot less exciting than some of the other inventions, especially for the final part of the finale episode. But eventually we learned that it was actually a unicorn that she had never seen before, and that probably would have made for a cooler episode. Anyways, moving on to season 2, Phineas and Ferb waste no time in making a boat called the Nosebud so that they can go out and find the Lake Nose monster. The boat has an elevator that goes to a sort of underwater bunker submarine where the Lake Nose monster actually visits and befriends them. The submarine is ultimately destroyed in a collision with Doofenshmirtz, leaving only the above water boat intact, which is mostly normal. Next up, Phineas and Ferb create a machine to translate Perry's chatterings into human language. They go above and beyond as always, and the machine can actually translate speech from any species of animal as well. This one doesn't get destroyed before Miss Fletcher can see it, but when they go to show it off, Perry purposely just chatters, making it seem like it's just a very complicated microphone. On to yet another stadium for the Aglet concert, which unfortunately is quickly abandoned when Doof wipes the memory of the word aglet from everyone's minds. In the beginning of the next episode, Attack of the 50-Foot Sister, Baljeet contacts the boys on a device that they made called the Baljeet Signal. He asks them to help him win the biggest watermelon contest, and the boys develop a growth elixir to grow his tiny watermelon to an overwhelming size. Candace takes some of the elixir to enter a modeling competition, but when she grows to Godzilla-like proportions and then goes to tell her mom, Doofenshmirtz accidentally uses the elixir on the entire universe, causing everything to grow and become proportionally normal again. In Backyard Aquarium, they build a backyard aquarium for their pet goldfish. They elevate the aquarium from an above-ground pool to a full-on marine land-esque show called Goldie's Aqueous Extravaganza. Unfortunately, it ends up getting frozen and the whales inside swim the ice blocks and the stadium down the street and eventually to the ocean. The next invention comes in Day of the Living Gelatin, where we see that Phineas and Ferb have just finished a molecular transporter before being inspired by the gelatin Candace and her friends were making. They end up going to Isabella's and then use her swimming pool to make the world's largest gelatin mold and create a gelatin trampoline that soon turns into a gelatin monster. The kids get to work with water guns, and for once, they are the ones who clean up their own mess. The next episode brings us back to London, which, where are they getting the money for all these separate trips to London? I didn't know they had cash like that. Here, the boys put together a huge water slide down Big Ben that flings you right onto a seat on the London Eye and then lets you skip the line. The slide is taken away by Doofenshmirtz's latest invention, just as Linda meets up with everybody else. The next episode is Don't Even Blink, and the boys get to work on a big and obvious ride in the backyard so that everyone can finally figure out where Phineas and Ferb's inventions go at the end of the day. They unfortunately don't get to find out, as it is soon struck by Doofenshmirtz's invisibility ray and then disintegrated before Linda gets a chance to see it. Soon the boys wake up extremely hungry in the morning after an unsatisfying fancy dinner, and Phineas and Ferb decide that their task for the day would be to open a restaurant called Chez Platypus. This quickly becomes a hotspot and just as quickly fizzles out and is bought by a man that wants to turn it into a chain. The boys hand over the rights to Chez Platypus once dinner is over, and the restaurant gets carried away by helicopter, leaving only the tables and chairs behind. The next episode starts with the boys using a machine they made to make the sunniest day ever. However, they end up finding what they assume to be a platypus egg and make the Platydroid, a robotic platypus butt incubation machine to keep the egg warm until it hatches, and Candace makes them put together a nursery as well. In the end, the boys fold the Platydroid into a CD, and Ferb shoves it into his pocket. In the episode Gaming the System, Phineas and Ferb set out to improve Buford's video game so that they can all go inside the game and play. They end up clearing the game, and that's just about the end of this one. The Chronicles of Meep begins with the boys playing catch. However, they shoot a ball into space, it hits a spaceship, and crashes Meep the alien into their backyard. Meep latches onto Candace, and the boys get to work repairing the spaceship so that they can get home. But not before they make a cute tracker so that they can find Meep when it runs off, allowing Candace, Phineas, and Isabella to go and find it while Ferb finishes the repairs. The next episode starts with the neighbor's niece and nephews visiting. They are suspiciously similar to Phineas, Ferb, and Candace, and they end up competing to help Candace prove that Phineas and Ferb are cooler than Thaddeus and Thor, as well as to show that they can build a better fort. In the end, they build a skyscraper that emerges from the ground and sort of reminds me of the Wayside building. The boys re-submerge the fort, leaving only the very normal top floor visible for their mom to see. Deplane begins with the boys deciding to make a plane larger than the Spruce Goose. They construct the papier-mâché paper pelican and bring all their friends sky high. In the end, they make a water landing and the plane melts away. The episode Let's Take a Quiz follows Phineas and Ferb as they help the Fireside Girls get their broadcasting patches by hosting a game show, which is, of course, incomplete without Phineas and Ferb's favorite thing to build ever, yet another giant stage. The game show is ultimately taken off the air when Dr. Doofenshmirtz unintentionally shrinks the whole set down. Car Wash begins with the boys soaring through the backyard and testing out their new Ladybug 2000 roving swing set, before deciding to help the Fireside Girls raise some money for Star-Nosed Moles by building an insane mousetrap-esque car wash with a turbocharged Uber nozzle. The fantastic, Ferbulous car wash of course draws in quite a crowd, and they undoubtedly raise a bunch of money for the moles before the car wash follows what are apparently the laws of the universe and is taken away as a result of a Doofenator and a massive mole carrying it to the sea. When Perry the Platypus is reassigned to a new supervillain and by extension a new home, Phineas and Ferb try to find their missing pet and invent the Platytracer 3000 to try and bring him home before putting up a concert on top of a skyscraper to reach the whole city. Perry winds up returning home to his family and all is right with the world. After a shipwreck, Phineas and Ferb start building shelter while their parents try to fix their boat to get home. They make a big, huge treehouse, and Candace is rightfully frustrated that they didn't just build a way home instead. A sudsy volcanic eruption carries their newly fixed ship back to the water, and the Fletchers make their way back home. Their next creation is brought to us by a rainy day stuck inside. The boys make a shrinking machine to play a wild game of hide-and-seek in the house with their friends and get into teeny tiny shenanigans. They lose the machine when Candace brings it to show their mom, but she accidentally uses it on herself and gets lost outside. They eventually gather the whole gang up together and get the machine to grow back to normal, as one of Doofenshmirtz's inventions self-destructs next to Phineas and Ferb's and destroys them both. The next episode starts with the boys building a humongous scale ship in a bottle, but they cancel the bottle to use the ship to help Baljeet out with his latest dilemma. They throw a romantic cruise for him and his friend Mishti, which takes off from the harbor and sets sail on a night full of romance, but Baljeet fumbles through the awkward date that neither of them want to be on. The ship eventually sinks and everybody escapes on a built-in escape water slide as the ship disappears into the sea. In the episode The Baljeetles, Phineas and Ferb use hand-shaped earplugs that I can only assume they made themselves. There isn't really another invention of theirs in this episode, so we're just gonna barrel into the next invention in the episode No More Bunny Business, where the boys make their own X-ray vision glasses after being let down by a pair that they ordered in the mail. And unlike most of their inventions, these ones don't disappear. This brings us to Spa Day, where the boys are inspired by Candace and Stacy's spa plans and set out to make their own in their backyard. The girls end up paying a visit to Phineas and Ferb's spa in the end, before Doofenshmirtz's new kitten sets off a laser beam that makes the spa disappear as Mrs. Fletcher arrives home. Following this, the boys try to make the biggest, most durable bubble ever, which carries them across town. The whole squad finds themselves at the mercy of the wind until the bubble gets popped in a tree and they return to the ground before their mom can see the floating boys. Cheer Up Candace begins with the boys working on a playing card replica of the Temple of Angkor Wat. The episode follows a bummed out Candace on the mend from her cancelled date with Jeremy, and the boys try to cheer her up by building a comedy club to make her laugh. When this fails, they construct the Mix-and Mingler to introduce her to some new friendly faces. The machine is quickly destroyed by some flying debris from Doofenshmirtz's latest scheme, and the Mix-and Mingler spins away into the sky. In the next episode, the boys create a roller coaster delivery system to help deliver Fireside Girl cupcakes, but it is soon transformed into broccoli by Dr. Doofenshmirtz. In the episode The Bully Code, the boys put together a Rube Goldberg machine that they invented to put Bulgy in terrible danger so that Buford would save his life. You know, normal friend group activities. He ends up saving Baljeet from a completely separate danger, and when Linda sees the contraption, she assumes it's just some weird public sculpture. In Finding Mary McGuffin, Phineas and Ferb make a fold-up black and white interrogation room to help them in their old detective show-inspired investigation into Candace's missing doll. Then, in Picture This, the boys literally turn the garage upside down while looking for Ferb's skateboard that was apparently left at their grandparents' home in London. They make a photon transporter machine to get the board back, and then get right to work on their mega half-pipe and what appears to be a people-sized slingshot. When Perry gets transported home before completing his mission, he slips a picture of the newest inator into the boys' machine and hits the self-destruct button when it arrives, blowing up both inventions before Linda is able to see them. Soon the boys help Jeremy get ready for a dance show with Candace. They make the Ferbulistic Groovatron 9000 for him and sync up Jeremy's two left feet with Ferb's crazy moves. They then reverse engineer a rocket that crash lands in their front yard and find out what it does. The boys conclude that it is an anti-romance robot, and ironically the two robots end up running away together. Well, flying away together, holding hands. Next, the Flynn Fletchers hit the beach and all disappear to find the underwater city of Atlantis. They hitch a bunch of balloons to it and make it rise back to the surface for one glorious moment before the balloons are popped and the city is swallowed by the sea again. In the Christmas special for Season 2, we see Phineas and Ferb transforming their beds into super-powered toboggans to ride across town, but the day is far from over, and the boys construct the ultimate rest and relaxation lounge for Santa Claus, equipped with a sauna, massage table, TV, personal gym, milk and cookies, reindeer feeding station, and a beard purifier. Their pièce de résistance is turning the entire city into a thank you card for Santa by decorating every inch of Danville. When Doofenshmirtz ruins Christmas and Santa returns every letter as naughty, Phineas takes to the TV broadcasting station and enhances the tower with Ferb to send a message to Santa's elves. When the elves come and tell them that Santa has already left and that it's too late, Phineas and Ferb whip up Santa's sleigh and workshop to save Christmas for Danville. Santa does end up showing up and takes the rest stop home with him, and everybody gets their perfect Christmas present. With that, we are back to summer in the next episode, and Phineas and Ferb make a device to scramble your molecules so they can pass through solid objects and get their mom's lucky guitar pick back. Later, Candace and the boys work together to throw their aunt a wedding in their backyard, and the boys make a ton of ice sculptures depicting their aunt and new uncle's adventures together. In the next episode, Phineas and Ferb put together a pep squad mobile to cheer on Lawrence and Candace in the annual father-daughter obstacle course, but Doofenshmirtz pops the blimp and it deflates away across the sky. Then, in Suddenly Susie, Phineas and Ferb build a giant waterfall ride that gets abducted by one of Doofenshmirtz's inator right before Linda can see it. The next episode has the boys working to create an anti-gravity fun launcher. Doof downloads the blueprints of the boys' machine and sets out to make it evil, but his machine ends up getting towed, so he steals Phineas and Ferb's very similar looking device just before Linda and Candace get home. Soon after, the boys and friends put together several all-terrain floats for the Tri-State Area Unification Day Parade. However, the balloons on top of them get hit with duplicating rays and make them float away, leaving only the kids' red wagons behind. Then in the episode Invasion of the Ferb Snatchers, Candace is convinced that Ferb is an alien, but it is later revealed that the boys were actually just fixing a spacecraft for one of Meep's friends. The launch pad that is left behind gets hit with an inator beam and folds up into a super small and neatly wrapped box. The next episode brings the boys to the mall for some back-to-school shopping, where Phineas comes across an old kiddie ride that he used to love. He hops on and is unimpressed, and why wouldn't he be? I mean, the kid's already made several large roller coasters just for fun. So obviously Phineas and Ferb get to work and give all of the kid rides a serious upgrade. The gang and Candace take them out for a spin before some workers come to take their machines away and replace them with new ones just in time for Candace to show their mother a perfectly normal, boring rocket ship ride for kids. The next episode is not Phineas and Ferb, in which Irving shows off his Phineas and Ferb knowledge to his brother. We get to see a few inventions that we haven't seen, like the solar-powered flock of mechanical hummingbirds, the cold fusion merry-go-round, and the full-scale replica of the Eiffel Tower. Following that, we have Phineas and Ferb Busters, which begins with an entire amusement park in their backyard that just disappears off screen as Candace wrangles Linda to the backyard as usual. Baljeet arrives with a game of spinning tops, but Phineas and Ferb decide that they just aren't cool enough, and they create large spinning tops that they can all ride in, and a wireless radiant power source to power them. The power source ends up being too powerful, and the kids eject from the tops as they spin too quickly and are lifted off the ground before flying away. Later, the boys finish up their ultimate frozen yogurt machine when they are visited by a wild chameleon that they name Steve. Steve gets hit with a growth ray, gets huge, and crushes the froyo machine, walking away before Linda can come home to see it. Alright, now does anyone want to take a guess at what the boys will make in Robot Rodeo? Because if you guessed a rodeo full of drivable robot bulls, you are correct. However, a wave of fog hides the rodeo from sight when Candace tries to show Linda, and the robot bulls chase a red balloon away from the rodeo, dragging the entire thing out of the backyard in the process. The episode The Beak wastes no time in getting into it, and we open as Phineas and Ferb Edge of Insanity Kiss Your Butt Goodbye Gravity's a Stone Cold Sucker Nightmare Rail Skate Track Obstacle Course of Doom. And thank goodness, they test it out before they skate on it because their trial run goes horribly, horribly wrong. So instead, the boys take the stairs down and think of how they could make the track work. They decide that enhancing themselves would be much more fun, and so they make this crazy two-person supersuit and take the track on themselves, and it is, in fact, pretty epic. They then fly to help Baljeet out of a tree and accidentally destroy the skate park when they come back home while trying to stop flying. Isabella actually sees their acts of heroism and writes an article about the new superhero, calling him the Beak, and Phineas and Ferb take on a brief life of heroism, even building their own lair in the tree. The Beak suit is sacrificed to destroy Doofenshmirtz's hijacked aircraft, and the kids all go home for snacks. Their next project is to try and make something with only pioneer tools, as Phineas calls them, and they build an entire old-timey town of log cabins. Linda does actually make it home to see this one, but Doofenshmirtz's latest inator rips apart time and space and makes it so the boys are not busted. Pretty convenient. In the next episode, the boys decide to take Candace's advice of doing something normal and make a lemonade stand, but not before Ferb shows off his nose-picking machine. The stand goes on to evolve into a full chain store with lemonade being produced by giant juicing robots that ultimately get a paper cut and malfunction. As a result, every store is closed. On to Phineas and Ferb's trip to Hawaii, where they put their aquatic primates, or A-primes, into the pool, and they grow into people-sized sea monkeys. It is unclear if the growth elixir from before was involved, but either way, they are big now. Later, they transform into people due to a doofenator blast, just as Linda and Lawrence arrive back at the hotel. The episode Summer Belongs to You begins with Phineas and Ferb's giant jump roping robot, and we don't really see where it goes, but it does disappear somehow. The boys decide that they need to create the biggest, longest, funnest summer day of all, and what better way to do this than on the solstice? Their plan is to build a plane and travel around the world following the sun's path for maximum daylight and maximum fun. Also, side note, as they take off, Ferb pulls a lever that moves the entire house underground for a moment, so they also invented a house elevator at some point too. The flight starts out exactly as planned, but when they pick up Vanessa in Tokyo, their plans start to get a little messed up, and they end up crashing in the Himalayas, but they are able to get back in the air for long enough to crash again in Paris. Phineas gets to work fixing the plane, disappointing Isabella, and eventually they transform their airplane into a seaplane. It's a pretty shoddy fix though, and the group ends up shipwrecked. And so they end up using their massive world map to make a massive paper airplane and catapult themselves into the sunset and back towards Danville. In Nerds of a Feather, the boys test out their special effects briefcase on Candace before showing it to Clive Addison at the Sci-Fi Fantasy Convention. Phineas and Ferb team up with Clive to use their special effects skills to stop the war between the sci-fi fans and the fantasy fans before projecting a giant monster in the middle of the battlefield. In The Wizard of Odd, the boys bring back what I can only assume to be the house elevator, which rises the Flynn Fletcher residence into the sky and spins it so it can be pressure washed. And when Candace wakes up from her Wizard of Oz dream, the boys show up at her window and ask her if she wants to join them on self-balancing unicycles that they built while she was sleeping. In the next episode, Phineas and Ferb are disappointed by the maze on the back of a cereal box and decide to make a better, more challenging one in their backyard. The gang gets together to race to see who can get out of the giant three-tiered maze first. Candace, Isabella, and the Fireside Girls in training make it out first, as the maze gets hit by an inator and rolls away. The rest of the group clears it just before it rolls off a cliff, and in the next episode, Linda revives her pop star career for a reunion show, and Phineas and Ferb transform an insecure Lawrence into Max Modem when he is worried that he isn't exciting enough for her anymore. Their next big idea was a remote control all-terrain vehicle. They take it for a spin, testing every terrain along the way, the last of which being space, as the ATVs jet off towards the moon before Linda can see them. In the next episode, Phineas and Ferb decide to make a tourist attraction for Danville, being the world's tallest building, only stopping when they literally hit the moon. The building gets lifted away when Doofenshmirtz rotates the moon, and the skyscraper, or space scraper maybe, rotates away with it. Split personality begins with Phineas and Ferb testing out their new molecular separator to separate the peanut butter from Buford's chocolate bar. Candace accidentally uses it on herself and splits herself into two Candaces. The Candace that wants to bust her brothers, and the Candace that loves Jeremy. The boys end up reversing the splitter and put Candace back together again, and she steps on a camouflaged rock button that swallows the machine into the ground and spits it out in Perry's secret lair. When Phineas and Ferb wind up with a cold in the next episode, they call their equally ill friends on their sick day video game backup system to hang out virtually and play a fighting game that they developed. Their network gets janked up when Vanessa's rave livestream signal interferes with it, and eventually it cuts their game's visuals completely. Next, the boys decide to rebuild the roller coaster, but this time do it as a musical. It pretty much plays out the exact same as the first episode, right down to Doof's inator lifting the coaster away. In Make Play, we see the final invention of the season, with Phineas and Ferb making a giant jukebox that gets yoinked away by Doofenshmirtz's machine just as soon as it gets unveiled. In Season 3, Phineas and Ferb come out swinging with a biosphere to fight the rainy day blues and help the Fireside Girls get some patches. The biosphere really looks like a golf ball, which makes it really funny when Doofenshmirtz's latest invention puts it off into the distance as Mrs. Fletcher arrives home. The episode Canderemy begins with the boys showing off their giant robot dog to their friends. We don't really see where this one goes, but we can probably guess that the boys took it apart afterwards. Next, the boys find themselves inspired by a cheetah and decide to make super shoes to make themselves faster. Candace ends up taking a pair of the unstable prototypes to try and be in two places at once. And this is one of the rare inventions that don't get destroyed or anything like that. Meaning we can go on to hot air balloons, which are inspired by their grandpa. Phineas and Ferb make these balloons for their friends and race them to the top of Gearhart's summit. Candace, who's having a whole other adventure of her own, sees the balloons in the air and tries to point them out to her mom, who is missing her contacts and mistakes the Phineas and Ferb-shaped balloons in the distance for the boys themselves. After this, the balloons are stolen by Doofenshmirtz. This brings us to Phineas's birthday, and the gang works together to put on a scavenger hunt and video presentation as a party for him. Which is fine and all, but it gets much more exciting in the belly of the beast, where Phineas and Ferb make a huge robotic shark submarine for a Harbor Day reenactment that doesn't royally suck. The robo-shark gets yanked into the ocean by Doofenshmirtz's saltwater taffy, and Linda never sees it. The boys also give Captain Squint a new prosthetic peg leg that doubles as a jetpack. In Moon Farm, Phineas and Ferb bring cows to the moon to try and make the legendary zero-grav moon ice cream. They build the cows a farm and grow grass on the moon to feed them while communicating with Candace at home through their mission control center in the backyard. When they come back to Earth, everyone gets out of the rocket, but one of the cows accidentally bumps a button and sends all the cows back to the moon. Next up, Phineas and Ferb build a supercomputer to ask it what nice things to do for their mom. It gets abducted by Doofenshmirtz's glorified metal detector and flies away as Linda walks up the driveway. In the episode Misperceived Metronome, Phineas and Ferb decide to turn their house into a fun house, which gets torn down and cleaned up by Candace, who was shot by Doofenshmirtz's least likely inator and made to help her brothers not get busted. Later, Phineas and Ferb make Candace a super-powered cell phone after they accidentally break her brand new one. This episode follows Candace for a while, but when we get back to the boys, we see them talking about the most interesting thing they've ever built, which was both very tall and very heavy. Fortunately, we don't get to see what it was, since someone from the museum just came to pick it up. In Magic Carpet Ride, Lawrence shows Phineas and Ferb a show that he used to like, and the boys decide to make a magic carpet like the one from the show. They bring their dad and friends on a ride on it around the city, and again, this is one of those ones that doesn't get destroyed, it's just parked back where it was in the living room. On a side note, I love that Candace is always trying to get Linda to see the boys' shenanigans, and Lawrence is just like, yeah, I'll go on a magic carpet ride. But this brings us to Bad Hair Day. Candace botches her hair before seeing Jeremy, and Phineas and Ferb help her out by making a hair growth machine to fix her hairstyle. However, Candace doesn't have enough time to sit under it for as long as she's supposed to, and cranks it all the way to the highest setting, making her hair grow all over her body, which of course leads the boys to making a hair removal machine, which they use to save her from extreme social embarrassment. The next project is a super awesome flying bounce house that Buford pops in front of a bunch of little kids. And when Phineas and Ferb are hit with Dr. Doofenshmirtz's dull and boring inator, the whole gang is anxious to get them back to normal. Luckily, when Candace finds herself in danger, the boys snap out of it and build a huge slide to save her life. Their next creation is a big jumping spring machine in the episode A Real Boy. Linda does actually see this one as well, but she keeps getting her memory wiped by the latest Doofenator. Later, when Candace injures her foot, the boys bring Candace a screen connected to cameras all over their house so that she can feel connected to the family despite not being able to move around. Then they get to work on a stratospheric ionizer to send a happy birthday message to an astronaut that will be passing over their backyard later that day. The ionizer gets sideswept by an asteroid and taken away before Linda can turn away from her gardening to see it. The Flynn Fletchers then hit the road in Road Trip, and the boys build a whole diner on top of the RV. The no-stop, truck-stop diner becomes an instant hit, as do with most of the boys' inventions, but just as quickly as it was brought into the world, the diner is torn off the top of the roof when the RV goes under an overpass. After Road Trip comes the movie Across the Second Dimension, and the first invention that we see in it is the Platypus field, aka the Platypus badminton field. The giant platypus racket reverses out of the backyard, and the boys, who are riding in a giant badminton birdie, crash into Doofenshmirtz's Evil Incorporated, where they help Doof fix one of his inators, as Perry joins the scene and fails to stop them from opening a portal to another dimension. They end up with the portal remote later, and start dimension hopping while running from their lives, but the extra evil Doof from the second dimension isn't done with them yet. The boys sneak into Perry's lair and make use of a summer's worth of old inventions to kick some serious cross-dimensional robot booty, ultimately saving the day before getting their memories wiped. Back to the TV series though, we have Tour de Ferb, where we open with the boys racing bicycles on a track that they mounted to the ceiling. They then put together a huge cycling track and some crazy bikes to go with it, and everyone participates in a massive race. Candace tries to show Linda the insane stunts that the kids are doing, but as always, the latest inator gets involved, creating a pop-up ad wherever Linda is about to look. In the next episode, the kids put together a giant, real-life version of a board game they used to play. After the game is done, all the pieces advance away thanks to one last roll of the dice, and of course, Linda just misses them. That brings us to My Fair Goalie. Phineas and Ferb build a football X7 stadium when Ferb's English cousin comes to visit and challenges them to a game. After which, the boys donate the stadium to the Snifferton Nostrils. This isn't the only game that they're going to be playing though, as Phineas and Ferb make a game of giant mechanical darts, but the darts end up being left behind at the Love Muffin Conference in the Danville Arena. Moving on to the Curse of Candace, where Ferb uses a laser pen that stores all of their blueprints. As they rifle through to pick what they want to do for the day, they actually decide to take requests. They make a super bright glow light for Isabella's plant, anti-grav barbells to make Baljeet stronger, levitation air jets for Buford, and a mirror that uses special effects to make it seem like the user is invisible for Irving. While those creations were for their friends, the next one is for the boys. Phineas and Ferb construct a computer-controlled, self-learning tower that they will try to escape from. The tower goes rogue and starts trying to hurt the boys after being hit by Doofenshmirtz's inator, but they make it out alive. However, the tower traps the boys in the backyard, and then their friends are trapped as well. The boys argue that they have friends all over the world, and all over the universe as well, thanks to Meep, and the tower continues to grow until it traps the entire universe, and the gang decides that that's a good enough fix for now. But on to a serious issue when the entire tri-state area experiences a potato shortage. The boys use a potato chip to genetically reverse engineer a new supply of potatoes using the newest invention, the Spuds-a-lot. This machine ends up getting set back in time thanks to Doofenshmirtz's shenanigans, and the boys move on to their next project, which is making a whole new language called Ferb Latin. This gets very popular and is even picked up by Doofenshmirtz's robot sidekick Norm. But other than that, craze quickly dies out before Linda can witness it. Not that I think this one would have made her particularly upset anyways. In Season 3's Christmas special, the boys put together a fake log cabin and fake snow, as well as a hot cocoa dispensing table to beat the summer heat and have Christmas in July. Also, Kelly Clarkson is there, which is kind of cool, I guess. The entire Christmas set gets transported to Doofenshmirtz's evil lair, and just like that, the holidays are over, and we can start talking about the next creation, the Mind Machine, which was originally made to help Baljeet get over his fear of contractions. However, Candace gets hooked up to the machine to find her memory of the bracelet from Jeremy that she lost, so that they can recreate it before he gets home. The gang travels into the depths of Candace's subconscious, but when they start getting terrorized by her deeply anxious nightmares, Baljeet is able to snap out of the machine's hold and yank all the cables out of it, ejecting everyone from Candace's mind. This brings us to Ants, where the boys unveil their Antius Maximus and the Resizenizer. When they scoop an anthill into the Resizinator, it gets hit with an enlarging fluid and a special light which funnels the ants into a gigantic ant colony. The boys and their friends douse themselves in some sweet, sweet ant pheromones and climb into the ant farm to go and live among the insects for the day. Candace winds up becoming the queen, and in her teenage nagging accidentally triggers an extremely fast technological and agricultural explosion in the ant society as they all try to please her. The giant ants reach spiritual actualization and abandon the ant farm to roam the galaxy freely, which is great timing because the physical ant farm gets hit by Doofenshmirtz's turkey ray and turns it into a giant Thanksgiving dinner that the ants carry away as an in-flight snack. Onto the remains of the platypus, where the boys make a celebration-seeking rocket and Cheesetopia, a utopia made of cheese. The rocket winds up at Doofenshmirtz's party, and his vaporizer vaporizes Cheesetopia before Linda can see it, the only evidence being the lingering smell of cheese. Following this, the boys want to take Perry on a walk, but the platypus is nowhere to be seen, so they do what any kid would do and make a giant robotic backup Perry for when they can't seem to find the little guy. The Perrytronic 3000 can do all the typical platypus things, like fly, shapeshift, and even gets duplicated by an inator before the two platypus robots are wheeled away in a seriously convenient display of physics. Following this in Perry the Actorpus, the boys actually don't build anything. The boys create a positive reinforcement machine for the Stop the Busting retreat at some point that does get absolutely demolished by Candace in a raid. Then in Let's Bounce, Phineas and Ferb make an anti-gravity machine and use it on some trampolines so that they can bounce around the skies, but the trampolines and the anti-grav machine get collected by one of Doofenshmirtz's aircraft, and it flies around crazily, just in time, of course, for the rest of the family to go to the backyard and miss everything. Their next creation comes when Baljeet wants to scale a mountain with the boys and Isabella, and Phineas makes a giant ice cabin at the top that quickly crumbles after Doofenshmirtz sacrifices the structural integrity of the mountain. Later, when Linda asks for some peace and quiet in the house to take an online test, Phineas and Ferb make super stealthy, super silent ninja costumes that hide the wearer from sight, making you basically invisible. When their mom eventually goes outside to see them, the suits slip away all by themselves. Next, Phineas and Ferb combine a warp generator and a trebuchet to bend the Earth together for a second so that their destination of Drusselstein is in launching range so that they can get the Dunkelberries for their mom's pie. Meanwhile, Vanessa brings Candace to Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated to search for a book, and Candace accidentally hits a button on an inator that makes the trebuchet in the backyard disappear. But it's been a minute since we've had some alien involved unresolved episodes, which brings us to Meepless in Seattle. The boys are playing with their giant pillow-fighting carts when Meep crash lands into the backyard as his nemesis arrives chasing after Meep and destroying the carts. Phineas, Ferb, Candace, and Isabella all escape with Meep on his ship, and Ferb ends up making the Cute Tracker 2.0 to help Meep stop his nemesis from finding the Cutonium first. They end up in space, yada yada yada. They don't really invent anything else though, so that's not my business for now. What is my business is when Phineas and Ferb make an entire amusement park on a track so that you only have to wait in line once. It ends up, getting juiced, I guess? Like, it's just straight up turned into juice. So I hope that no one was still on the ride when it happened. In the next episode, Phineas and Ferb make a super twisty super sprinkler to beat the heat that gets untwisted and taken down by Doofenshmirtz's latest scheme. Following that, Candace actually picks a creation, and she asks the boys to make a mom attractor to hopefully get Linda to see and bust them once and for all. However, the giant Linda robot gets up and walks away to take care of the giant baby robot in Doofenshmirtz's lair. This brings us to Cranium Maximus, where the boys make a brain-stimulating helmet for Baljeet to keep his mind sharp during the summer. But he gets way too into it, like crazy evil scientist into it, and locks himself up in a tower that he builds to put all the world's atmosphere on the moon. The rest of the gang strap some body doubles into a jetpack to distract Baljeet, while they tunnel up through the tower to stop him. Luckily, the tower gets lifted off into space when Buford puts the helmet on and builds an equally large wedgie machine. In Agent Doof, the boys are turned into babies, but that doesn't stop them from inventing. They steal parts off of a motorcycle and soup up their stroller before zooming away from Candace. Now, remember Swinter? Well, in Minor Monogram, Phineas and Ferb decide to revisit that and make Sfall in their backyard. One mountainous leaf pile, a balloon ride to the top, and a handful of gourd helmets later, and the gang is ready for some serious fall fun. However, the giant leaf pile is cleaned up by a massive propeller that blows it all away. The next adventure comes when Crikey Crocodile goes missing, and Phineas and Ferb take to the sewers to find him, equipped with an airboat and the Croco Locator. He's returned home safe and sound, and the airboat is hit with the latest Doofenator and turned into a chicken. Next on the agenda is Jetpack Volleyball, which is thanks to Candace's wacky, nervous imagination, and obviously this ends up being awesome. However, the sports equipment gets turned into party supplies after the game thanks to Doofenshmirtz. In Sci-Fi Pie Fly, the gang decides to solve the mystery of Danville's crop circles. They build a flying saucer of their own to go take a better look, and this actually stays in their backyard for quite a long time without Linda ever seeing it. Eventually though, the boys just dismantle it and store it somewhere else. Then we have the boys' magic show that they put on in the backyard. The Mind Flip is a radical, fantastical display of magic for the short time that it lasts, and their final trick is to make the entire thing disappear. Then, in Tri-State Treasure Boot of Secrets, Phineas and Ferb take part in a local film festival contest by submitting a movie that they made with their dad. Phineas and Ferb's next invention is a device that can turn any solid into a liquid. The boys use the State of Matter transfer device to experience weird new flavors, but Candace accidentally liquefies herself. The boys reverse the machine and re-solidify her, and shortly after, Doofenshmirtz shoots the machine from across town, duplicating it and causing both matter transfer devices to liquefy each other, just in time for Linda to come home and see nothing has changed. The following episode starts with the boys showing off their new nanobots to make a bunch of stuff in the garage to impress their friends. However, when a squirrel gets a hold of the nanobot remote, he makes them lose their shape and clump up on the floor in big piles, and that's kind of the end of the nanobots. Following this, Phineas and Ferb make a highly unconventional vehicle inspired by the animals of the African research station that they are staying at on their vacation to get a better look at the uncharted gorge. The vehicle ends up crashing in the gorge and getting picked up by the OWCA's giant magnet in the second part of this episode. Then the boys make their own cable box called Ferb TV and sit Candace down to have her watch the TV shows that they've come up with. It gets hit with an inator and disappears before Linda can be dragged into the room by her daughter. In When Worlds Collide, the whole gang gets together for a sleepover in Phineas and Ferb's backyard. Boys hook up a telescope to some fiber optics and a projector screen so that everyone can look through it at once. They find a planet is speeding towards the Earth and make a giant spring to bounce it back the way they came, and naturally the spring gets attached to the planet and flies away with it. What Did I Miss follows Phineas as he tries to help Isabella earn her surfing patch by creating a surfboard. As he shows her the prototype, Baljeet and Buford enter with a bunch of domesticated squirrels. The gang gets to work trying to make them wild again, and the end of the process results with the squirrels surfing away on the surfboards. Following this, the boys make a quilt. It is just a normal quilt, there's nothing special about it. However, their next creation is a quantum vortex, which is made by playing ping pong. However, in the end, when they rack up enough energy, the ping pong machine vacuums into itself. And just like that, we are on to the final episode of Season 3, Blackout, where the boys build a mystery device to have the best blackout ever. The power comes back on as Linda and Lawrence arrive home, but Phineas says it was taken by a bunch of guys on jetpacks. I literally have no idea what the device was supposed to do, but from what we do see of it, it looks like a horrifying torture device, which is a wild way to end the season if you ask me. And with that, the seemingly eternal summer has come to an end as Season 4 is rung in with the kids on their winter break. Phineas and Ferb make a gladiatorial hockey Z9 rink that Linda misses as she tries to find a camera to take a picture of her totally normal little hockey players. Of course, as she returns to the rink to take that picture, a monster ice polishing machine tears through and levels it once again. On New Year's Eve, Phineas and Ferb make a giant ball that they can drop from space. After it lands and the kids get out of it, it goes back into the sky and erupts into fireworks while everyone celebrates the new year together. We quickly get back to summer and Phineas and Ferb make a giant tire swing, but when Buford messes with the machine, it ends up turning people into flies, and of course, before it's fixed, it hits Candace, because who else would it hit? The boys eventually turn her back into a human, Buford hits a fly button, which makes the tire swing fly away, and Phineas turns the control center into a sorbet machine. After that, Phineas and Ferb make the dental hygienosphere with a teeth coaster inside. Buford ends up flying away after getting hit with an inator, and his very strong shoelaces get caught on the giant tooth that lifts it away with him. In the episode My Sweet Ride, the boys fix up Candace's new car. It gets passed off as Lawrence's work, and thankfully, this one doesn't get destroyed, giving Candace a rare win in her life. Soon after that, Phineas and Ferb make rutabaga vehicles for the running of the chinchillas. The chinchillas get hit with the latest inator, which makes them huge and leads to them destroying the rutabaga vehicles. In Sidetracked, the boys make some sort of crazy metal structure that gets carried away by an equally crazy cloud, but we don't really get a good view of this because this is more of a Perry episode. In the following episode, though, when Baljeet finds himself paralyzed by indecision, Phineas and Ferb help by making an infinite probability generator so that he can try every decision. In the end, Linda offers Baljeet way too many types of juices, which creates a whole army of him. However, when a giant boomerang smashes into the probability machine and destroys it, it leaves only the original Baljeet when Linda steps into the backyard again. Following that is another Meep episode, as the boys start talking to him through the galactic web. They create the Mindshare device to basically celebrity wife swap with the galactic prisoners across the galaxy. The aliens set the Mind Swap device to self-destruct in an hour, and the now alien gang get to work building a way home on their end with a little help from Candace, just in time for it to poof out of existence. In Backyard Hodgepodge, Phineas and Ferb recycle old parts from their old inventions to make something new. The gang builds what seems like a recycled amusement park. Linda does actually see this one, but due to her lack of sleep, she just assumes that she is hallucinating as she has been all morning. The boys then turn the fly-person sorbet machine into a bee-person sorbet machine for the Fireside Girls, as well as making the ultimate wading pool for Linda, but it gets hit with bee pheromones and lifted off by a swarm. Following this, the boys explore surface tension by creating the world's largest drop of water. They stay cool with the water droplet for a while, but it gets hit with a pointy metal structure that breaks the surface tension and causes the water to spill out across Danville, creating its newest lake. Later, the boys put together a sensorial helmet that makes Buford's senses more dog-like to help Isabella find her dog Pinky. However, Buford eventually takes the helmet off and just abandons it somewhere. This leads us to Not My Problem, where Phineas and Ferb make a giant Gordian knot out of licorice, but when Doofenshmirtz hits Candace with an Eat It All inator, she consumes the whole thing before Linda can see it. The boys then create a huge rock climbing wall made out of lawn clippings, and this one gets taken away by a bunch of rare birds who use it for nesting materials. That brings us to La Candice Cabra. Phineas and Ferb make the Chupacopter to search for the Chupacabra. The boys get back from New Mexico with a real Chupacabra, but when they go to get it a snack, it escapes, swapping places with Buford and flying the Chupacopter back to New Mexico. With that, we have reached Isabella's birthday, where the gang throws her a huge party with a massive cake, with confetti cannons, a gigantic piñata, and the grand finale that we don't get to see because it gets hit with one of Doof's inators and bursts into butterflies. Eventually, Linda finds herself fireworkless for the upcoming block party, and so her boys create the pyrotechnic holographic light and audio simulator and electromagnetic radioscope, or the Phlaser for short. This allows them to put on a giant light show for the party's big finale without actually having fireworks. While Norm dances at the party with a hot lady robot, his head spins off and hits the Phlaser, which triggers the finale ahead of schedule. The Phlaser then launches into space and shoots off a blinding light before exploding, probably. In the next episode, the boys repurpose the leftover parts of their repurposed invention from a few episodes ago to make the ultimate obstacourse that gets covered by a video of the boys sitting in front of their tree just as Linda looks into the backyard. Following this is the Marvel crossover, which opens with the gang on space surfboards before being led back to their Phineas-shaped space station and returning to Danville shortly afterwards. Later, the gang makes the Marvel heroes the Shed, or the secret hideout for emergency defense, which is full of gadgets and gear to help the Avengers while they work on their machine to get their superpowers back. Isabella and Candace end up restoring their powers through the space station, but not before sending it hurtling towards Earth. Luckily, Doofenshmirtz end up disintegrating the fallen space station, and the Avengers go back to New York before Linda even knows what's going on. In Thanks But No Thanks, Phineas and Ferb see a photo of their grandparents when they did pyramid water skiing and decide to make their own sports with pyramids. That's pretty much it for this episode, so we can move on to Troy's story, where the boys recreate the Trojan War after Candace tells them that she is reading the Iliad. Their set ends up getting cleaned up by Lawrence when he is hit by Doofenshmirtz's declutterinator. Next is the Halloween special for Season 4, and the boys throw a huge Halloween party in Doofenshmirtz's castle. The boys go on to put together a huge foam skate park so that Buford can skateboard with them without having to worry about breaking any bones. After an epic skateboard montage, Foamtown is dismantled by a giant bat and rolls away from the backyard. Cheers for Fears begins with the boys showing off their giant future-powered propeller before deciding to help Candace put together a mega interactive scrapbookanza for Jeremy's birthday, but unfortunately it flies away from the backyard before he can see it, so the boys just give him the blueprints for the scrapbook instead, which is just a regular-sized scrapbook. In just our luck, the gang builds a zipline tennis game across town for the ultimate game of sky tennis, or skinnis for short. But the earth opens up and swallows the zipline tower before Linda can see it in the backyard. Later, Baljeet interrupts the boys' game of baseball to go on a mathematical tangent. Phineas is inspired to use geometric algorithms to pit brain versus brawn in the ultimate batting challenge. When Buford and Baljeet put their skills together and complete the challenge, the batting cage jets into the sky and explodes in a firework display. And keeping with that sporting theme, while most of the Flynn Fletchers watch the Monteville Bad Grand Prix, Phineas and Ferb get up to some shenanigans in the backyard that somehow involve a kiddie pool, DNA, and a Bigfoot. No, not Bigfoot, just a Bigfoot that walks out in the backyard. There is another movie, but I'm not really sure when it takes place, so let's take a little detour and talk about it here. It begins with the boys playing with a giant robot clown that they made in the backyard when it gets turned into dust and vacuumed away. Candace and Vanessa end up getting abducted by aliens, and Phineas and Ferb take to the stars to go after them using a portal like the one to Mars that they helped Baljeet make, but it doesn't work and they have to use Doofenshmirtz's galactic travelinator. The portal ends up getting set on fire at the end of the movie and burned down to ashes before blowing away. Phineas, Ferb, Isabella, Baljeet, Buford, Doofenshmirtz, and secretly Perry travel to the alien planet of Fibla Ut in the Vrolblok cluster, and when they finally make their way back to Earth, they wind up free-falling to the ground with a bunch of scrap from the ship they fell from. Here, Phineas and Ferb do what they do best and make something out of nothing to save the day. Their makeshift kayak plane lands safely, and they immediately start making some scary-looking robots to fight off the aliens. Unfortunately, they get blown up, right away. Everything obviously ends up fine though, so let's just talk about the last invention that we see in the movie, which is a very sweet World's Best Sister mug that projects all of the boys' favorite memories of Candace. Now, if you're thinking that it's been way too long since Phineas and Ferb have put on a concert, you don't have to worry, because their next invention is a VR concert stage called the Ferbographic technology that they use to broadcast holographic projections of their concert around the world. But when Doofenshmirtz moves the placement of the Earth in the solar system and plunges the Earth into impending eternal winter, Phineas and Ferb enlist the help of kids all around the world to build synchronized rockets that will pull the Earth back into its proper orbit. Now that the world has been saved, The boys are back to business as usual and wake up bright and early to make breakfast for their dad for Father's Day, along with the help of some enhanced kitchen appliances that they later tuck back into the counters before building an exact replica of their grandfather's old biplane. They use this to go pick up their grandfather for their traditional Father's Day flight and send the plane home with him for the next year. Sticking to the skies, the boys decide that next they want to fly kites, so they build the wind amplification device and some huge kites for all of their friends before taking to the sky. But when a drop of water gets into the amplification device, it generates a storm and all the kids come down before it gets too dangerous. In the end, the machine gets crushed in collateral damage from Perry and Doofenshmirtz's fight, and the kites probably fly away. Back on the ground, Phineas and Ferb put together a huge marionette to help the Fireside Girls with their puppet show. Perry takes control of the puppet to fight off Doofenshmirtz's robo-rabbit, and the marionette sails away on the water with Doofenshmirtz probably eventually sinking. When Phineas finds himself alone with Isabella, the two end up going on a picnic, but nothing Phineas ever does can just be normal. And when Ferb gets back from his dentist appointment, the picnic turns into a picnic-themed amusement park, but it gets hit with a teleportinator and disappears. I don't know where it teleported to, but I do hope the people are at least enjoying the park wherever it ended up. Their next stroke of inspiration comes when Lawrence wants to empty out his collection of take-out utensils from the garage, and the boys repurpose it all into a massive sculpture in the backyard, but Phineas actually cleans it all up and puts it all back in the garage when he's hit with Doofenshmirtz's unretrogradinator. The backyard all cleaned up, the boys have a lot of room to work on their next invention, the scent diffuser. This one makes a bubble around it that changes the smell and flavor of the air. Phineas tells the group that they're the first people to ever taste blueberry air, but obviously this was a time before vaping. Now we are at the Star Wars special, but it doesn't follow the real Phineas and Ferb, so I'm not going to be talking about it in this video. Plus, it's not canon, so we're just going to move along to the mysterious catapult that lands in Phineas and Ferb's backyard. The boys build a Z-ray machine to see inside it, but ultimately Buford just finds a key and they open it up and end up unleashing the wrath of a black hole in their backyard. Thankfully, it's hit by an unexistinator and the backyard gets to stay intact. Now, while this episode is technically in an alternate universe, it is still our Phineas and Ferb, so I'm going to be including it as well, but it is on thin ice. Anyways, the boys get back to business when Baljeet comes over to show off his solar system hat. Buford keeps spinning it around to race the planets, and Phineas and Ferb build a giant scale model of the hat, or a tiny scale model of our solar system. You can choose. With this, they get to actually race the planets. The solar system speedway gets bought and taken away after the race is over, and the boys move on to their next invention, the rubberization ray. This gives their skin the qualities of rubber and allows them to bounce all over the city before Doof unleashes an army of zombie Doofenshmirtzes, and the boys take to the city with rubber armor to find Isabella and undo the zombification of Danville. The rubberization ray ends up being destroyed by the zombies, and the gang ends up at Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated, where they build a way to the water tower to turn everyone back to normal with some man-made rain. Next, we jump ahead in time a little to the beginning of the school year, where we catch a glimpse of Phineas and Ferb seriously upgrading their schoolyard at recess. The rest of the episode is about Doofenshmirtz and Vanessa, so let's jump a few more years into the future, where Phineas ironically reflects on the past. Here we see a few miscellaneous inventions for a couple of seconds. A giant robot, a popcorn machine, a mystery machine. No, not the mystery machine, I just don't know what this thing is. A huge can opener, and a gigantic robotic eggplant. Turning the clock back to the summer that we know, the boys ride around the neighborhood on hoverboards to collect the gang for the last day of summer. They want to do everything, so they build the everything ride for an epic send-off with their friends. After the ride, the whole thing folds back up into a blueprint before Linda can see it in the backyard. Candace then goes to see Vanessa and uses one of the inators to go back in time to the beginning of the day. Danville ends up reliving the last day of summer over and over, with the everything ride changing a little each time. Rifts in space-time begin popping up and taking things from the world, Phineas and Ferb being some of them. The machine and the rest of the gang end up in some weird pocket dimension where all of the rifted objects are sent, and everybody works together to fix it and get back to the real world. And just like that, Season 4 is over, and we can take a quick detour to the show Milo Murphy's Law for the crossover special where the boys show up just in time to save everyone with a tennis racket robot. They create a Murphy's Law suit and go take down some baddies to save the day with a little help from time travel. Now that only leaves the new season to cover, and we open with the boys giving a presentation of what they did over the summer to their class. We then learn that it's the last day of the school year, and we get thrown right back into the swing of summer. Phineas and Ferb are looking to put something together for a block party, and when their friends keep throwing ideas at them, they decide to build it all. One world's biggest bounce house, a giant whack-a-pest, a huge pop the balloon dart game, flying bumper cars, a massive cotton candy machine, and of course at the end of the day, all of these machines get Actually, Linda ends up getting vaporized, and the gang uses the rides to collect and restore Miss Fletcher, and then they are all washed away and destroyed. But after which we all go back to normal. That said, giant cotton candy is not all the boys have up their sleeve this summer. Next on the agenda is a massive submarine sandwich submarine, which they take to the Marianas Trench via helicopter. The submarine ends up getting covered in sand, and Linda mistakes it for a sandcastle. Feeling inspired by a gecko documentary, Phineas and Ferb make springy gecko gear next, and bring the gang on a crawling tour of Danville. Much like those sticky slap hands that you would get from capsule machines, the gecko gear gets a little too nasty and stops sticking to things, and the gang leaves the gear behind. Now, most people would rather stub their toe than try to do anything on a scorching summer day, but not Phineas and Ferb. They set out to make an endless ice luge track to try and keep cool, and they ride it around town to help everyone else beat the heat as well. However, the ice ends up melting before Linda can see it. Speaking of which, at Candace's therapist's public talk about her and Doofenshmirtz's overlapping struggles, which seems like a major confidentiality breach, Phineas and Ferb build a flying disco blimp that ends up getting hit by an inator and destroyed. The boys decide to dabble in animation next and build Tropey McTropeface, the Zootrope. It gets hit with an inator that turns it on its side, and it rolls out of the backyard and goes on quite its own adventure, even saving the world, meeting its zootrope god while it's on the verge of death, I guess, in space, and even having babies with the Ferris wheel is, I think, what's implied here. I don't really want to think about it though, so we're gonna just move on. Just before the gang decides to go with Buford's bread bowl hot tub idea for the day, they catch Lawrence trying to build a new bookshelf. The boys decide to help out and make the ultimate summer reading bookcase for their dad, with the help of a book robot and a book plane. While Lawrence goes to get Linda to show her the awesome job that the boys did, Doofenshmirtz's face plants sprout and eat the shelves, leaving only a sensibly sized bookshelf in its place. Later, when the family gets together to bring Perry in for a checkup at the vet, they met with a waiting room of unhappy pet owners, and Phineas and Ferb build the ultimate while you wait pet wash and grooming machine to make the waiting room feel a little bit less gruesome. Doofenshmirtz accidentally goes through this and breaks it, sending it flying before Miss Fletcher pulls up in her car. At night, Phineas and Ferb play a game of lacrosse country while waiting for Ferb to get back from God knows where. And the giant lacrosse stick catapults itself out of the ground when a huge load of fish get thrown into it. Speaking of fish, the Flynn Fletchers find themselves on a cruise ship to see the tri-state aurora, and Phineas and Ferb waste no time at the kids' club pool whipping out a water hoverboard and a mini medieval catapult. When the clouds threaten the visibility of the aurora, the boys attach a bunch of helium balloons to the ship and raise it into the sky so that they can still see it. Then Doofenshmirtz's remote shrinks the balloons and also the clouds blocking the sky, and the ship is back in the water before Linda can get away from her spa day. The next free summer afternoon gets dedicated to making a giant pogo stick that gets pogoed into space by Doof's potato salad monster, and then we move on to when Phineas and Ferb decide to spend time with their mom and leave a holographic message behind for their friends. But that's about all the boys are responsible for that day. Now, getting back to some more exciting day plans, when Baljeet lands a movie audition, he's worried about his probably less than average acting skills. And so Phineas and Ferb build the sci-fi set from the movie right down to the horrifying worm monster to help him out. However, Baljeet is dead set on seeing through the movie magic until Buford sets the terrifying robot worm to an 11, and he finally gets into character. The director of the movie actually sees this and tries to buy the set off of them, but they just give it to her for free. Keeping with that sci-fi vibe, we finally get to see the third installment of the Meep trilogy, where the boys create Stabby Barf Pain, a combination of all 4 seasons to entice Meep's nemesis with the ultimate vacation destination so that Meep can bust him once and for all. The gang tidies up Stabby Barf Pain while Candace and Meep go on their busting adventure. In the end, Phineas and Ferb give the Stabby Barf Pain machine to Meep's wife, Brenda. Moving back to more terrestrial summer plans, the gang has a sleepover at Phineas and Ferb's house. The boys blow up the Ferb Vision movie theater, but a bunch of birds fly down and eat all the popcorn and pop the movie dome before Linda can see it. And what's a more classic summer activity than a sleepover, you might ask? Well, obviously it is making a forced perspective Western saloon with your friends. I don't really understand this one, and honestly, it sounds like none of the kids do either, so we're just gonna skip forward to when Linda gets home and opens the gate to see a super tiny western town. The gang then decides to peel 387 bananas to make the world's biggest banana cream pie, which Buford eats just as Candace wrestles Linda into the backyard. They're not done though, and they somehow make one giant banana and a giant banana peeler to go with it, which they later use to peel Candace out of the sentient Candace suit. It is a horrific episode, so we're going to step away from the body horror and get back to busting basics. When Linda's book club nemesis gets on her last nerve, Candace gives her a crash course on busting. Ironically, while the boys are in the back of the episode making banana sculptures and inflatable dancing balloon guys. The banana sculpture gets left at the grocery store and the balloon guy gets dropped off at a car dealership while Linda learns how it feels to fumble a bust. Honestly, she just can't catch a break because Phineas and Ferb's next project comes up when she drops her wedding ring down the drain, and the boys make a drill to go and get it from the pipes underground. The drill breaks when the gang finds the ring, but luckily a rush of water carries them back to the backyard and somehow closes the hole that they made in the ground. Now from deep underground to up in the air, Phineas and Ferb let their inventions take them anywhere, and this time they want to see the mock macaws, migratory birds that can camouflage themselves to look and sound like anything, even people. The gang builds a mock macaw mansion up in the tree in their backyard, but it gets hit with a shrink ray and ends up looking like just a normal birdhouse when Linda comes to check it out. After the kids see the birds, they decide to make an enemy out of them by building a scarecrow mech suit, but the suit blows away in the wind. And speaking of things that blow away, the next episode opens on the boys flying around on giant dandelion seed pods as Baljeet and Irving develop their own invention, a flying unicycle. This takes inspiration from one of the boys' past inventions that we didn't really get to see, the blendocopter. The blades on the unicycle chop down the stalk of the giant dandelion before getting blasted away in the aftermath of Doof's latest inator. And that is every single creation that Phineas and Ferb have ever made. If you enjoyed, remember to leave a like and subscribe for more content like this in the future, and you can let us know if we should cover Doof's inators or any other ideas down in the comments. Till next time though, thank you all for watching.